Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone to the third meeting of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission for calendar year 2015, and ask that you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on this morning's agenda is the approval of the minutes of the January 15th meeting, and it's a pleasure to recognize Commissioner Brown as editor of the minutes. Commissioner Brown.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Chairman, I want to let everyone know that I did review the minutes of January 15th this year, which is the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and I move that they be approved as submitted.
Second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted, and it's a pleasure to welcome to the podium to commence with our public meeting agenda items, Ms. Cheryl Walker-Davis. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
May it please this honorable commission, on behalf of your various offices and bureaus, we present for your consideration and disposition the following agenda items, commencing with the case of special interest and the proceeding involving the Joint Default Service Program of Citizens Electric Company of Lewisburg and Wellsboro Electric Company. In lieu of the binding poll scheduled, therefore, there is the motion of Commissioner Cawley as well as the statement of Commissioner Brown.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of his motion. Commissioner Cawley.
Thank you, Chairman. I ask that it be placed on the record as if I'd read all of it. Let me abbreviate. Before us is the petition for a joint default service program of Citizens Electric Company of Lewisburg and Wellsboro Electric Company. It was filed with us for the period June 1st, 2015 through May 31st of 2018. Under this petition, the companies propose to replace the existing stratified procurement plan and instead procure a full requirements contract for a 3-year period for each of the companies. The Office of Consumer Advocate argued that as a result of this proposal, customers would be exposed to 100% of their energy consumption at the price experienced in the market on a single day, and that the proposal does not feature any of the price diversity benefits envisioned by the Competition Act when it called for a prudent mix of different products in a supply of portfolios. This observation is correct, and therefore the motion modifies the company's proposal such that a prudent mix standard of default service plans is adopted. I commend the companies for advancing an otherwise innovative proposal that reflects the unique characteristics of their smaller service territories. I also encourage electric generation suppliers to step up to the plate and bid so as to demonstrate that they can effectively serve a constructive role in facilitating the provision of default service under these more innovative default service designs. As a final note, without going into details, the companies have proposed what they would do in the event of a lack of wholesale supplier responses to requests for proposals. The motion points out that we believe this is contrary to our regulations and that the companies should instead abide by our regulations and continue to treat any returning customers the same as any new or existing customers as it relates to the provision of default service. So with that, I move that the Office of Special Assistance prepare an order consistent with my motion.
Second. Any discussion? Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate Commissioner Cawley's motion and the direction he's attempting to take this filing, but I do want to note that I still have concerns with the proposed program's lack of long-term contracts, and the inclusion of energy products such as blocks, future index strips, or alternative energy credits in excess of 4 years represents potential options for obtaining compliance with the long-term product mandate that I see under the code. So given the lack of long-term contracts and the lack of any evidence substantiating this omission, I will respectfully dissent on his motion. I will submit my entire remarks for the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Is there any further discussion? We'll note the objection here of Commissioner Brown, and the motion passes 4-1.
Continuing with the presentation of public meeting agenda items and matters on behalf of the Bureau of Audits, it is recommended that the Bureau's recommendation with regard to the focus management and operations audit of First Energy PA companies be adopted, noting the oral statement of Commissioner Cawley.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of a statement. Commissioner Cawley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to vote yes on this recommendation, but I want to make it clear that my affirmative vote today to release the report and to proceed with the implementation plan should not be construed as an approval of the plan. This audit raises very significant concerns, and I plan to review it further to ascertain whether the Commission should take further action to ensure, shall we say, a more enthusiastic compliance by the First Energy companies. So with that, my vote is yes, but it is not an approval of the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
With regard to matters presented on behalf of the Office of Special Assistants, it is recommended in omnibus fashion that the Commission adopt the items on page 3, commencing with the recommendation to nominate a board member for the Telecommunications Relay Service Advisory Board, continuing with the remaining item on page 3, all items appearing on page 4, and the 2 items appearing on page 5 through and including the recommendation in the proceeding involving the Wellsboro Electric Company and Citizens Electric Company's non-bypassable customer choice support charge.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On page 6 of the public meeting agenda, with regard to the complaint proceeding involving CRH Catering Company versus Blue Pilot Energy LLC, there is the motion of Vice Chairman Coleman.
I'd like to recognize Vice Chairman Coleman for purposes of his motion. Vice Chairman Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman. I would ask that my motion be entered into the record as though I had read it in its entirety. Before the Commission for disposition is a petition for interlocutory review in answer to material questions filed by Blue Pilot Energy. This case involves 4 identical formal complaints filed by CRH Catering against Blue Pilot relating to charges for electric supply service. The petition seeks Commission review of an order issued by the presiding officer denying Blue Pilot's motion for summary judgment to dismiss the complaints for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. My motion grants interlocutory review, answers the material questions in the affirmative, and dismisses the complaint for the lack of subject matter jurisdiction. In short, I do not believe that it can be reasonably inferred that the complaint involves any subject matter over which the Commission has jurisdiction. Rather, the customer is simply alleging that the rate charged by Blue Pilot is too high, which is an issue that is beyond the Commission's subject matter jurisdiction. While I have sympathy for the customer here, I believe that Blue Pilot's motion for summary judgment should be granted dismissing this case. Therefore, I move that the Commission grant interlocutory review and answer Blue Pilot's material questions in the affirmative. The formal complaints filed in the above captioned docket are dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction, and the Office of Special Assistants prepare an opinion in order consistent with this motion.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Turning now to the presentation of matters on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, in omnibus fashion, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendations commencing with the recommendation in the application proceeding of Trademark Merchant Energy LLC at the top of page 7, continuing with all items on pages 7, and the first item on page 8 pertaining to the application proceeding of Discount Select Services Corporation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
We recommend the adoption of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services recommendation in the proceeding involving Verizon North LLC's 2015 price change opportunity and rate rebalancing filing, noting the statements of Vice Chairman Cawley, Vice Chairman Coleman, Commissioner Cawley, and Commissioner Brown.
So moved.
Second?
I'd like to start by recognizing Vice Chairman Coleman for purposes of his statement. Vice Chairman Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman. I would ask that my statement be entered into the record as though I had read it in its entirety. My statement explains why I support approving Verizon North's residential rebalancing filing and its 2015 price change opportunity, or PCO, rate filing. Verizon North is proposing to implement most of its allowable PCO increases through increases in its business local usage rates under 6 optional calling plans. Thus, one of the main issues presented here is whether the new rates for the 6 local usage calling plans are just and reasonable. I acknowledge that business customers subscribing to one of these 6 plans will potentially experience a sizable percentage increase versus the current local usage plan rates. However, I believe the new plan rates are just and reasonable. Verizon North's business usage rates in the 6 calling plans are comparable to rates charged by other Pennsylvania incumbent local exchange carriers and offer similar plans. Moreover, the increases apply to optional calling plans, most of which have been grandfathered for over a decade and are no longer open to new customers. As optional calling plans, subscribing customers have other service options, including with Verizon and other providers. Lastly, the universe of impacted business customers is relatively small, as these 6 optional calling plans are not widely subscribed to, and the number of subscribers has decreased significantly over the last 3 years. Another issue, which is whether the increases in the business local exchange, the local usage plan rates are subject to rate cap applications to rebalanced basic local service rates. The cap was established in Verizon North's network modernization plan and, in my view, applies only to the rates resulting from a rebalancing. Because Verizon North's local usage plan increases are 100% PCO increases, I do not believe that they are subject to the cap. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Now I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of his statement. Commissioner Cawley.
I respectfully dissent and have taken pains in 5 pages of riveting text to explain why, and I will spare everyone from reading it, but I do respectfully dissent.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. Now I'd like to recognize Commissioner Brown for purposes of her statement. Commissioner Brown.
Can I read all 5 of my pages?
You have executive privilege here, Commissioner Brown.
I am going to submit my comments for the record, but make some brief statements. I support Verizon North's rate rebalancing and its right to recover the $477,200,000 in revenue under Chapter 30. Verizon's filing complies with those Chapter 30's provisions that permit revenue increases to support a rural broadband deployment program. However, I do not support the manner in which Verizon North proposes to recover those revenues in rates. Rates under Chapter 30 plans must still be just and reasonable under Section 1301 of the Public Utility Code. And case precedent allows the Commission to rely on the principle of gradualization to prevent rate shock. Verizon North's rate recovery proposal imposes huge rate increases on its business and user customers. The increases range from a low of about 41% to some services to rate increases as high as 97 to 100% for others. This, in my view, is rate shock. It can be avoided by the principle of gradualism, a principle that allows a utility to recover revenues over time. Verizon North could have banked all or part of the revenue recovery as other Pennsylvania carriers have done. They could have staggered the increase over a longer time period. They could have voluntarily limited these rate increases to no more than $3.50 per year for business customers and mirror the $3.50 annual rate cap on residential rate rebalancing. They could have allocated some of the increase to the per-call rate that customers pay when they use measured local service. But they chose not to do any of these alternatives, and for those reasons, I Although I support their right to recover the revenues, I would disagree in terms of their way of implementing it. So it's a partial dissent.
Partial dissent, okay. Any further discussion? We'll note the objection of Commissioner Cawley and the partial dissent of Commissioner Brown. The motion passes 4-1.
Continuing with matters presented on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, it is recommended in omnibus fashion that the Commission adopt the items commencing with the recommendation in the proceeding involving the UGI Utilities, Inc. Tariff supplements clarifying language pertaining to competitive volume customers, and continuing with the remaining item on page 8, as well as all items appearing on pages 9 and 10 through and including the recommendation in the proceeding involving the increase in rates of O'Malley Moving and Hauling, Inc.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Law Bureau, it is recommended, again in omnibus fashion, that the Commission adopt the items on page 11, commencing with the recommendation in the proceeding involving the Keystone Telecom, Inc., that being a recommendation to revoke the certificate, continuing with the remaining items on page 11, as well as the first item at the top of page 12, in the proceeding involving the National Fuel Gas Distribution Company Universal Service and Energy Conservation Plan proceeding.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
It is recommended that the Commission adopt the Law Bureau's recommendations in the proceeding involving the Lyft, Inc., experimental service for Transportation Network Company, experimental service of Transportation Network Company services, and the compliance filings they're appearing, noting the joint statement of you, Mr. Chairman, along with Commissioner Whitmer.
So moved.
Second?
Like to have our joint statement entered into the record here this morning. Before the Commission today, as obviously was mentioned, a compliance filing by Lyft, Inc. in response to 2 separate orders dated December 18th of calendar year 2014, conditionally approving Lyft to legally operate here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We agree with the staff recommendation that filing before us adequately demonstrates compliance with the conditions that were set forth in the December 18th order. And we support the staff recommendation to approve the compliance filing. The action here today exemplifies our stance that this innovative use of public space should be encouraged in a way that is consistent with protecting the traveling public and supporting economic development across the state. And actually would go on to say new modes of transportation options for customers. To that end, we're pleased to approve this filing and issue Lyft a 2-year certificate of public convenience. Let me go back and just repeat that, a 2-year certificate of public convenience. With that said, this case has brought to the forefront the need for both legislative and regulatory reforms for the passenger carrier space. And I want to commend legislative leaders that have reached out to my colleagues and I to really work cooperatively. And I stress the point of the 2-year certificate because it is 2 years. It's not 3. It's not into perpetuity. So now more than ever, we need the support of the legislature to move forward and codify what's been issued in this compliance filing. And I thank the work that has been done again by our Chief Legal Counsel, Mr. Buck Panque, and his team in bringing this together. And Cheryl, I will give a shout out to OSA as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know you're a little uber sensitive to that. Right? Oh, this is Lyft. I'm sorry. And let me just conclude by saying the Commission looks forward to continuing its work with the General Assembly on TNC legislation and further tends to review our own regulations in the future. And I want to commend my colleagues. We're circulating internally a document known as Transportation 2.0. And through the work of our teams here at the Commission, working with our Bureau of Transportation, I think looking out over the next 6 to 9 months, we will have modernized some of our regulations around transportation. So I think it's a good story, and I'd like to chalk it up to the fact that our transportation network companies have obviously invigorated a debate here in Pennsylvania on not only competition, but choice for the traveling public. So At the end of the day, I think we have struck an appropriate balance in providing a compliance approval here, and we look forward to welcoming Lyft into the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Only 66 counties, 65 counties. The 66th county is regulated by the Philadelphia Parking Authority. I want to make that clear here today. So with that, I would again have this, I'm glad to join Commissioner Whitmer in entering this joint statement into the record here this morning. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Turning now to matters presented on behalf of the Office of Administrative Law Judge with regard to the complaint proceeding involving Stephanie M. Sawyer versus Philadelphia Gas Works, there is the joint motion of Commissioner Colley and Commissioner Brown, as well as the statement of Commissioner Whitmer.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Colley for purposes of the joint motion here this morning. Commissioner Colley.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, we ask that it be placed in its entirety on the record, and I'll summarize. Before us is the complaint of Stephanie M. Sawyer, which alleges that Philadelphia Gas Works removed her improperly from its customer responsibility program. Complainant is a lawyer. She operates her legal practice out of her home, where she resides with her 2 children. PGW took the position that, quote, if you are operating any type of business out of your home, no matter what the percentage is, you're not eligible for the CRP program. Administrative Law Judge Aranda Vero found that Ms. Sawyer's use of 25% of the service address regularly and exclusively for her law practice rendered her ineligible for participation in the CRP program. The ALJ noted that the CRP program is funded through a universal service surcharge that is passed on to PGW's other ratepayers, and the complainant's business would thus receive an undeserved subsidy from those ratepayers. Further, she concluded that there is nothing in the Public Utility Code or PGW's Universal Service and Energy Conservation Plan that would provide for the application of CRP to anyone but a residential customer. Our analysis of the code, PGW's Universal Service and Energy Conservation Plan, and PGW's tariff leads us to conclude that the complainant is a residential customer and is eligible for the CRP. Nothing in Chapter 14 of the Public Utility Code requires a conclusion that, that the complainant is ineligible for the CRP program. That being the case, and based on the record, complainant's primary use of PGW's gas service is for household purposes, and she is a residential customer for purposes of the plan. Therefore, she's eligible for CRP. We acknowledge that Chapter 14 of the Public Utility Code does allow for restrictions, and we certainly appreciate the ALJ's desire to protect customers from unfairly subsidizing others through the CRP program. But there are other policy considerations that merit consideration to determine whether a mixed-use residential customer, such as complainant, should be eligible for CRP or any other customer assistance program. Restrictions on the eligibility of a residential customer for an assistance program should only occur after a thorough commission analysis with input from knowledgeable state and community organizations. Should PGW desire to restrict the use of its customer assistance program because of a customer's business use of his or her residence, it can propose an amendment to its plan so that the commission and all interested parties have an opportunity to thoroughly consider and review all the relevant issues in an open forum. Therefore, we move that the Office of Special Assistance prepare an order consistent with this motion.
Second.
Any discussion? I'd like to recognize now Commissioner Whitmer for purposes of her statement. Commissioner Whitmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like my statement entered into the record as if I had read it in its entirety. The Commission is considering today the complaint of Stephanie Sawyer that alleged Philadelphia Gas Works improperly removed her from its customer responsibility program because Ms. Sawyer operates her legal practice out of her home. I understand the position of the majority today that in this instance, the combination of Chapter 14's definition of customer assistance program, which is found in Section 1402 of the Public Utility Code, and
PGW's tariff definition. I was wondering why Cheryl was looking at me. Um, Definition of residential customer precludes the result argued by PGW that if you are operating any type of business out of your home, no matter what the percentage is, you're not eligible for the CRP program. However, I agree with the ALJ that permitting small businesses operating from home to benefit from PGW's CRP on an ongoing forward basis is not the right policy decision. I agree with ALJ Vero that because PGW's CRP program is funded through a universal service charge that is passed on to PGW's other residential customers, the complainant's business, no matter what percentage of the overall usage is in the home, will be receiving a benefit on the backs of other non-commercial customers. I further agree that there is nothing in the code, PGW's Universal Service and Energy Conservation Plan, or Chapter 14 that provides for the application of CRPs to anyone other than a residential customer. As explained in the majority's motion, the ambiguity here lies in the unartful wording of PGW's definition of residential customer in its tariff. By having the phrase primary use of gas service for household purposes, PGW's tariff impermissibly contemplates that CRPs can potentially apply to non-residential customers in certain situations. Because of the slippery slope such an interpretation creates, and because there is nothing in the code, PGW's Universal Service and Energy Conservation Plan, or Chapter 14 that suggests this result, I reluctantly concur in result only in this instance and urge PGW to eliminate any ambiguity going forward by making the necessary changes to remove these mixed-use scenarios from being eligible to participate in the CRP program. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitmer. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting that Commissioner Whitmer is concurring in result only here this morning on this case.
It is recommended that the commission adopt ALJ Watson's initial decision in the complaint proceeding involving John Lavely versus West Penn Power Company, noting the statement of Commissioner Whitmer.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Whitmer for purposes of her statement. Commissioner Whitmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I would like my statement entered into the record as if I had read it in its entirety. Before the Commission for Disposition is the complaint of John Lavely against West Penn Power. The complainant alleges that electricity for his rental properties was interrupted for about 8 hours, resulting in frozen pipes and other damages. First, I am in full agreement with the decision of the Administrative Law Judge, Jeffrey Watson, dismissing the complaint. West Penn, like most utilities, does not and frankly cannot guarantee perfect electric service. In this case, the record evidence shows that the company made all reasonable efforts to reestablish service to the complainant's properties as quickly as possible given the circumstances, and it's those circumstances that deserve highlight today. The complainant's outrage started on January 6, 2014, at the beginning of last year's polar vortex. High winds and extreme temperatures brought the complainant's subtransmission line down. At the time, the temperatures were about 20 degrees below zero. These temperatures were the conditions in which West Penn's linemen had to work to restore power, and they did so in less than 8 hours. We all rely on electricity on a daily basis for everything from heat to charging our omnipresent smartphones. By many times, we take the service for granted, but the impacts of an outage can range from really very mild irritation to very significant life-threatening situations, and customers rightly do expect to have their power restored in a timely manner. However, it's also very important to recognize that the provision of electricity and frankly all utility services requires a dedicated workforce of men and women who brave all types of weather and conditions to ensure that the lights stay on, the water is running, and our phones work. We're in the middle of another cold winter, and this case serves as a reminder of exactly what Pennsylvania's utility workers are subjected to in order to get the job done for all of us. And I want to take just a minute to say thank you to them for their service and hope that they all stay safe this winter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitmer. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting Commissioner Whitmer's statement.
It is recommended that the Commission adopt ALJ John DeBurr's initial decision in the proceeding involving Lori A. Keenley versus PPL Electric Utilities Corporation.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Should be noted that the remaining item on page 13 in the proceeding involving Hassam Hashi versus Philadelphia Gas Works has been postponed until the public meeting of February the 26th. Turning now to page 14, it is recommended that the Commission adopt this ALJ Hoyer's recommended decision regarding the joint stipulation in the proceeding involving People's Natural Gas Company and Mountain Energy, noting the joint statement that you have, Mr. Chairman, with Commissioner Whitmer.
So moved.
Second?
Like to have the joint statement, joining with Commissioner Whitmer here this morning, entered into the record. Before the Commission here this morning is a recommended decision of Administrative Law Judge Mark Hoyer, which recommends the approval of the joint stipulation that was filed on December 11th, calendar year 2014, guaranteeing that the customers of Mountain Energy Ltd. receive reliable gas service throughout the rest of the winter. We agree with the conclusions that have been reached by ALJ Hoyer and support the adoption of the recommended decision. The joint stipulation calls for People's Natural Gas Company to provide gas supply and operational support to Mountain Energy customers, which here we are today experiencing another cold weather snap. And in this particular case, these customers almost a year ago were without gas service to their homes because of the poor track record of this particular entity known as Mountain Energy. In fact, let me just say that this company has failed miserably in providing safe and affordable gas service to customers. And I'd also take this opportunity to thank Paul Metro, our gas safety director, Ralph Glazier, Representative Pam Snyder, and former state senator, now Pennsylvania Fire Commissioner Tim Solibay. They were first on the scene to alert us of this unfortunate situation that hit last calendar year in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. This morning, Peoples is to be commended. Peoples Gas is to be commended for their responsiveness and willingness to aid Mountain Energy customers, and we sincerely thank them for their efforts. This issue, though, that has really arisen to the forefront of our legislative priorities for calendar year 2015-2016, and I commend my colleague, Commissioner Cawley, at our recent informational hearing with Chairman Godshaw and Chairman Daley talking about this issue and how this commission has done a remarkable job on the water side of the ledger, taking distressed water systems. By the way, I share it with everybody here today. In 2008, when I came on the commission, we had close to 500 distressed water systems. Through the work of people like Paul Diskin, our Department of Environmental Protection, formerly Carol Kozloff on my staff, working cooperatively and collaboratively with DEP, we were able to stress test those entities and really get world-class investor-owned utilities providing service to those customers. I need not remind anybody in this room about the Emlenton water case that we had to deal with and the actions we had to take in that particular case with an emergency order. This is no different. And this case cries out, as Commissioner Cawley alluded to in his remarks in front of the Oversight Committee, that we need to get expansion of Section 529 of the Public Utility Code, to include all fixed utilities. For those of you who aren't familiar with Section 529, it gives the Commission the power to order the acquisition of small water and sewer systems. So the expansion of that, or the broadening of that, to small gas companies, I think would be a step in the right direction. And as you know, this commission has used that authority sparingly, but we've done it with precision and great success to ensure that customers of troubled water and sewer utilities throughout the Commonwealth receive, again, the holy grail, safe, reliable, and affordable utility service. So the expansion of this authority would allow the commission to move more adequately in addressing such issues as the ones that have arisen in this particular case. And so, again, I just want to stress the importance of one, having a company like Peoples Gas step up to the plate, but more importantly, working with our legislature to get this expansion of our authority, because this case is a textbook example of why we need that authority. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to have this joint statement entered into the record, working with my colleague, Commissioner Whitmer. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes the presentation of regular agenda items. Turning now to the carry-in agenda. On behalf of the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendations pertaining to the partial petitions for reconsideration and motions to strike in the proceedings involving LIFT's applications for experimental service.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that does complete the presentation of public meeting agenda items.
Okay, I believe we have no other, well, we have a couple announcements to make, before we adjourn. One is, and Cheryl, I'd be remiss in not recognizing you for your efforts in leading our Black History Month activities. As you know, February is Black History Month, and the national theme for this year's celebration is A Century of Black Life History and Culture. And there's two events that are coming up, and I would strongly encourage you to join us in these events. One is a public program at the Formal Auditorium at 12 noon on Wednesday, February 25th. And then we have a VIP reception at the State Museum from 4:30 to 7:30 on Thursday, February 26th. I believe we have invited Governor Wolf to join us for this event. And let me just say, as a past participant in this event, it gives me great pride working with my colleagues that when you go up there representing this commission, you know that Cheryl and her team and the work that goes into this with other state agencies, and the fact, Cheryl, I know I'm going to get this wrong, how many state agencies do we have currently participating?
We have 19 state agencies that are collaborating along with Dauphin County and the Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Development Institute. So 21 entities.
So it's a true testimony to not only your efforts in leading this, but I think it's something we should take pride in as an organization, that we are the lead organization in pulling these 19 different groups together. So just a reminder there. And on that note, we're adjourned.